Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Qin Mu and Pan Gongso walked out side by side and left Jade Fragrance floor, walking out of the city while following the street. The capital city in the early spring was still pretty chilly, and even in the noon, the sun wasn't very high up. It was located in the southern part of the sky and wasn't dazzling in the least. The capital city was still pretty bustling in the spring, while people coming and going. Some young masters and young ladies of wealthy families would form companionship to walk around, and their clothes were mainly sable fur coats. Wearing these fluffy coats, it would serve as a contrast to make their fair skin stand out more. During this season, numerous wealthy families would already have boarded flying ships to head to the south to get through the winter, only coming back when spring was turning into summer. However, it was different this year. The natural disaster had caused the south to be as cold as the north and perhaps even colder, therefore most of the people still chose to remain in the north. After all, there were all kinds of natural and man-made disasters out there, so it would be better to stay safe in the capital city. Qin Mu and Pan Gongso walked very slowly as both of them were adjusting their state. Pan Gongso was no doubt a capable person that had reincarnated 19 lifetimes and lived 20 lifetimes. He soon adjusted his essence, chi, and spirit to their peak, while Qin Mu was still slowly adjusting. Murderous intent started to pour out of Pan Gongso and was targeted at Qin Mu as he slowly quickened his footsteps. His murderous intent was directed at Qin Mu to make him react, having no choice but to change his walking posture so as to not reveal a mistake. In Imperial College, Qin Mu had aimed him in this way as well, to force him to hobble as he walked, borrowing the bending of his body to not reveal any mistake in his action so that Qin Mu couldn't take advantage of him. Now, he was giving him a taste of his own medicine, using his peak performance and aura to pressure Qin Mu, forcing Qin Mu to follow his tempo, to change along with the change of his aura. As long as Qin Mu had no choice but to follow his tempo, he would be able to hold the right to be active, causing Qin Mu to fall into a passive state, becoming weary from dealing with him. To avoid revealing a mistake, Qin Mu would continuously change his trajectory and change his aura. The longer the road he took, the more changes there would be. In the end, the number of changes will surpass the horizons and knowledge of this youth, making him unable to change his trajectory anymore. When they reached the outskirts of the city, killing Qin Mu would just become a matter of 1 or 2 moves. Old fox. Qin Mu had a grave expression. This was a very terrifying existence. Pan Gongso was such a terrifying person. No matter if he was stronger than his opponent, he would immediately grab the upper hand if it was right in front of him, magnifying his superiority as much as he could. After 10,000 years of polishing, he was already rarely moved by external matters. Every word and every action moved according to the experience he had accumulated over the past 10,000 years, and his experience was like runes and reasons, deeply imprinted in his moves and actions. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Blind had both said before, to apply knowledge and action as one. Old Ma had also said to abide by the rules. With the accumulation of 10,000 years, Pan Gongso had managed to achieve this step. As for applying knowledge and action as one, Qin Mu had his own understanding. Not taking action according to your knowledge, that's insincerity. Not succeeding after taking action, that's incapability. Taking action because of knowledge, that's the heart of utter sincerity. Succeeding in your action, that's carrying out to the end. At this point, it would already be difficult for one to be influenced by other people and incidents. And the prerequisite of applying knowledge and action as one was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study the underlying principle of a matter and turn it into one's own knowledge. For example, cooking. To perfect the craft of cooking so there's nothing to be picky in regards to the color, fragrance, and taste. For example, construction. To construct buildings and pavilions to be sturdy, beautiful, and useful, being able to look magnificent and not crumble under storms or earthquakes. For example, shipbuilding. To fully understand the principle of building a ship, using sturdy materials and not sinking when facing wind and waves. This was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study one thing or one matter to its extreme, understanding all the principles behind it. When one managed to pursue knowledge to the end, could one apply knowledge and action as one? Pan Gongso was such a person. Reincarnating over and over again, he had studying all kinds of techniques to their extremes, and all the knowledge he had learned had become his foundation, becoming a part of his words and actions. Every action and word from him held deep significance, and even from the start where Qin Mu had met him, Qin Mu was already brought into his tempo. From Qin Mu's provocation outside Hall of Six Directions and all the way to chatting with Pan Gongso in Jade Fragrance floor was all a web weaved by him. A huge web that was methodically weaved to trap Qin Mu within. Now, as they walked out of the city, it was this spider pulling back its web while spitting silk on Qin Mu's body, coiling around Qin Mu and binding him. This made the space which Qin Mu could move around in becoming smaller and smaller. When they were out of the city, it would be the time for the huge spider to spit its venom to poison its prey. Qin Mu had never seen such a terrifying opponent before. No matter if it was Daozi or Fozi, or even those great experts of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm that had chased after his life, they were all much inferior compared to Pan Gongso. Now, Qin Mu was already forced to hobble as he walked, leaning unsteadily from side to side. Meanwhile, Pan Gongso was walking more and more steadily. He was forcing Qin Mu to show all his changes so as to not show his mistake. When Qin Mu exhausted all his changes, it would be the death of Qin Mu. To be able to clash with such a terrifying existence is a huge opportunity. Qin Mu's footsteps suddenly stopped, and in that instant where he had stopped, hundreds of mistakes appeared on his body. It could be said that there were mistakes all over his body. Pan Gongso was slightly stunned and also stopped in his footsteps. In this instant, he had the urge to make a move. With mistakes all over Qin Mu's body, these were all fatal mistakes that could take Qin Mu's life with one strike in Pan Gongso's eyes. However, he hesitated for an instant. Qin Mu was the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, and Heavenly Devil Cult Master has an extremely huge power, the #1 sect in the secular world. If he was to kill Qin Mu here, it was difficult for him to escape the revenge of Heavenly Devil Cult. In this instant where he hesitated, all of the mistakes on Qin Mu's body vanished and his aura suddenly burst forth, releasing his murderous intent which overwhelmed Pan Gongso as he raised his leg to walk forward. Pan Gongso's expression sank and had no choice to catch up with him, sinking into a passive state. Qin Mu made use of his hesitation to free himself from the disadvantageous situation. This was indeed out of his expectation. Even though it was evident that this youth's experience was inferior to him, he had a kind of acute spirit that was long obliterated in him. After reincarnating so many times, that acute determination to improve in his first lifetime had slowly been obliterated under the endless passage of time through lifetime after lifetime. Now, he had once again seen this kind of essence, chi, and spirit from Qin Mu. Now, it was his turn to be suppressed by Qin Mu and forced to walk forward in accordance to Qin Mu's tempo. The body techniques and auras of these two people changed continuously, and each change was very fine. However, as they walked more and more, the swaying of Pan Gongso's body became wider and wider, making him look like a drunk man that was leaning from side to side, catching the attention of many people. The situation now seemed like Qin Mu was using an invisible rope to lead a 13 to 14 years old drunk child to walk on the street. The battle of experts was just like this. Especially when the difference between the both of them was not huge, any carelessness would result in a reversal of situation. Qin Mu made use of his mental state in not daring to make a move on him in the city to reverse the situation. Even though the two people had yet to exchange blows, they have already started to clash using their wisdom. Even if the situation was reversed, Qin Mu still didn't let his guard down. It was as Pan Gongso had said, Qin Mu had no time to strengthen his Six Directions realm. Even though he had entered Six Directions realm at the same time as Pan Gongso was different from him. Pan Gongso had the experience of 20 lifetimes and had broken through Six Directions realm 20 times. In just a day, Pan Gongso had enough time to strengthen this realm and mobilize the power that could be mobilized in this realm. On the other hand, Qin Mu had to spend time to familiarize and figure his way around in order to control the power in this realm. The most crucial point was that he had no time now to cultivate his Six Direction realm. He already had the circulation diagram of Six Direction realm and Seven Stars realm. one of obtained from the first hall in Imperial College, while the circulation diagram of 7 Stars Realm was inscribed on a stone tablet in Roland's Golden Palace. However, for him to comprehend Unity Technique, he needed to fuse Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique and Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and it was impossible for Pan Gong So to give him time to fuse his techniques. Qin Mu's mind delved into his 6 Directions Divine Treasure, and in this Divine Treasure, he saw his spirit embryo. He then saw the 5-element stars and shrine in the sky, sensing his 5-element star sovereigns. From this angle of the spirit embryo, he could see the 4 sides of heaven and earth. It was evident after entering 6 Directions Realm, it was required for him to combine these 3 great divine treasures as one. His technique had to pass through all 3 great divine treasures to form one whole body. In his 6 Directions Divine Treasure, there were 4 sides of heaven and earth, strengthening his magic power to be able to execute divine arts. This was a qualitative leap, but since he didn't have the circulation diagram of 6 Directions Realm for Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique, it would be his greatest shortcoming. Finally, the two of them walked out of the capital city and came to the outskirts of the city. The extent of Pan Gong So's movement as he was walking became more and more exaggerated as he staggered along. However, the changes in his body motions and techniques were still endless as he maintained a perfect state that didn't have any mistake. Qin Mu couldn't help admiring him. As they walked from the center of the city to the outskirts of the city, just the body techniques alone had gone through dozens of changes from Pan Gong So. Each and every kind of body technique was extremely intricate and cultivated to their extremes. He moved forward using the form of a dragon and really looked like a true dragon moving on the land. When he moved like a tiger, he gave off a feeling like he was a fierce tiger. When he executed the body technique of a phoenix, he was flying low like a phoenix. When he executed the body technique of a swimming fish, he was like a fish swimming against the current. It was hard to imagine how a person could cultivate so many body techniques to the extreme. 2 of them moved further and further, and their murderous intents grew thicker and thicker. From Qin Mu's Dao Tai sack, a sword pellet flew out along with Junior Protector Sword, hanging on his waist. Meanwhile, the 2 pig-slaughtering knives on Qin Mu's back dropped off and the 2 knives stabbed into the ground one after another, showing only the knives' handles. The 2 knives were over 30 yards apart. His bamboo cane stabbed onto the ground while his iron hammer landed on the ground. From his sleeves, his brush, ink, papers, and inkstone also slid out and got thrown onto the ground as he was walking. As he was walking, his body trembled and heavy chunks of iron fell off from the front and the back of his chest. The iron boots on his feet suddenly exploded and the iron weight strapped on his legs also fell off. His body became light and his bones crackled and rattled. His aura had actually once again risen like the tide. Pan Gong So still continued moving along with his tempo. Qin Mu raising his aura had brought him an even larger pressure, but he was still able to endure and didn't reveal any slight mistake. The grasses on the grassland far away had already grown out and there were numerous couples stepping on the greenery as they formed companionships to go on a spring outing. Some children were flying kites and running happily on the grassland. Some young men were showing off their body techniques as they rose into the sky with a few steps, stepping on the kites in the air, arousing the girls below to exclaim in admiration. The exclaims of admiration gradually lessened as the people started to look at the 2 strange youths, which were Qin Mu and Pan Gong So. The flock of birds in the forest flapped upwards and moved far away to avoid them. The murderous intent from these 2 youths had astonished them. As Qin Mu and Pan Gong So walked to the side of Mud River, and suddenly there were countless of huge fishes jumping out of the water, flopping on the surface of the river to escape towards the heart of the river, making the river extraordinarily bustling. The instant these fishes and birds jumped and flew up, a child suddenly closed his eyes and opened his mouth wide to bawl loudly. Amidst the cries, Qin Mu and Pan Gong So, who were beside the river, unleashed their moves at practically the same time. All kinds of runes from Buddhist scriptures appeared around Qin Mu's body and revolved like a huge bell covering him. The 5 heavens from Rulai's Mahayana Sutra took shape as Buddha voice surrounded him. At the same time, he activated 9 Dragon Monarch technique, and the dragon chi came swarming from the 9 huge dragon veins surrounding the capital city, raising his aura once again. 9 Dragon Monarch technique was the supreme art of the imperial family and had been taught to him by Emperor Yangfeng personally. Under Qin Mu's execution, the dragon chi pouring out from the 9 dragon veins materialized and even entered the river water, causing dragons to fly out of the river while surging towards Qin Mu. He took the first strike. At this point, no matter if Pan Gongso revealed any mistake or not, he would be crushed by Qin Mu's abnormally dense vital chi that could suppress all kinds of intricate moves. Pan Gongso would be overwhelmed by an incomparable strength. The best method to deal with Pan Gongso was to use magic power to overwhelm him and not compete with him in moves. Boom! The river water exploded and flooded into the sky, transforming into the form of a huge Buddha that was over 30 yards tall which and stood like a water mountain on the river. Water dragons coiled around this huge Buddha, and its 5 fingers were like 5 mountains rushing down at Pan Gongso. The 9 dragons let out angry roars as 9 dragons monarch technique fused with Tempest of the 9 dragons from Thunderclap 8 strikes. This strike showed the vastness of Buddhism's divine arts and the invincibility of the imperial family. The 9 dragons pounced on their target. Bang, bang, bang. The speed of the stream surpassed the speed of sound, and they exploded with thunderous bangs, facing nothing they couldn't destroy. What's divine art? This is divine art. Qin Mu's strongest point was his magic power which surpassed that of his peers by several times. Even the old monsters like Village Chief were much inferior to him on the same realm. This kind of magic power was something Pan Gongso had no hope of matching. That's why Qin Mu wanted to use his absolute strength to overwhelm Pan Gongso, turning all of his 11,000 years of cultivation useless. At the instant Qin Mu's attack was about to burst forth, Pan Gongso's counter also arrived. What he used was a sword pellet that was the size of a thumb, and resplendent sword lights burst forth from within it. The second writing from the 14 writings of Tao Sword, binding of 5 chi and 3 eons, rising on the spot, cloud chariots crossing. He used the ultimate art of Tao Sect straight away, using the purest pre-celestial supreme mystery technique to execute the second sword of Tao Sword. The sword lights contained wood, fire, earth, gold, and water, which are the 5 chi, heaven eon, earth eon, water eon as well as the 3 eon. Heaven eon was akin to the sun and called supreme yang, water eon was akin to the moon which was called supreme yin, while earth eon was the neutralization. Once he executed this sword skill, the sword lights constructed the ideal world of Tao Sect, one with a sword sun, sword moon, sword earth, and the invigoration of the 5 chi. The sword skills of Tao Sect required extremely high attainments in algebra and used it as their foundation. They believed that all the great Tao in the heaven and earth could be answered using algebra. This was their path of 1 produces 2, 2 produce 3, and 3 produce all things. In their eyes, numerals construct everything in the world. Even if it were life forms or something else, it was all the same. Everything was ultimately just wonderful numerals. This was why Tao Sect had created a circular Wuji diagram, the Taiji diagram that separates yin and yang, and also the 4 symbols diagram, 8 trigrams, 64 hexagrams, to calculate the great Tao and all things of the heaven and earth. And when these became sword skills, they would form pictures and be in operation continuously, evolving all living things in the world and achieving magnificent power. Tao Sect's 14 writings of Tao Sword contained an ideal world in each writing. They were beautiful pictures developed from algebra, interpreting the marvel of heaven and earth. This was the biggest difference between Tao Sect and Buddhism. Tao Sect was the school of maths and Buddhism was the school of mind. The disciples of Tao Sect often joked about it among themselves. Your math isn't good? What are you cultivating for then? It's better to go home earlier to carry your baby. The divine arts of the two people collided. One was a sword skill divine art while the other was a corporeal body divine art and a spell divine art. When they collided, it was a terrifying sight. The surface of the river trembled, and water floated up into the sky. More than that, the ground trembled as well, resulting in a minor shake. The impact of the aftermath caused fine jets of water to pierce through the willows beside the river, while the sword chi stabbed into the rocks, creating numerous holes in the reefs by the shore. The world-shaking strike from Qin Mu rushed into the ideal world of Tao Sect formed by Pan Gongso's sword lights, and the overwhelming power got broken down by the mathematics contained in the sword lights. In Pan Gongso's sword skill, something as boring as algebra could be enchanting and resplendent. Among the enchanting sword lights, the 9 water dragons and water Buddha rapidly crumbled, unable to withstand a single blow from the second move of Tao's sword. Countless sword lights flew and struck the Buddha rays, which had transformed into a huge bell around Qin Mu. Ripples appeared on the surface of the bell, and in the next instant, the huge bell was destroyed. Qin Mu had no change in expression as his sword pellet landed into his hand. In an instant, the sword lights from inside the pellet burst forth. Qin Mu didn't use sword treading mountains and rivers, but went straight to the second move of sword picture. Whoosh! One side of Mud River turned scarlet, and blood-red sword lights poured forward like a huge sea. Among them, there seemed to be an emperor god rising up, pointing his sword at his enemies while looking disdainfully at everything out of the corner of his eye. Sword of founding emperor, sea of blood. Tao's sword and sword picture collided, and Pan Gong Tso gave a grunt. The 5 chi and 3 eons were instantly destroyed as matchless sword lights came bombarding his face with exceptional killing intent. His body rose into the sky and soared like a brave dragon, executing marvelous body technique. It changed continuously like swimming fish, flying sparrows, and 9 phoenixes, but he still couldn't avoid all of the sword lights. Kai, Kai, Kai! Crimson lights emanated from his body as he leaped around, landing on the surface of the river and exploding the water in all directions. Whoosh! Qin Mu leaped up, and the sword lights in his hand vanished. The sword pellet transformed into a huge knife and sliced apart the river surface. Pan Gong Tso swung his sword pellet to receive this blow only to hear a series of bangs. He tumbled 6 to 7 times on the river surface like a skipping stone that a child had thrown before stopping his momentum. On the other side, Qin Mu sprinted over while stepping on the river surface, and every time his feet landed on the river's surface, there was a huge explosion, splattering water in all directions. Before Pan Gong Tso could even land on his feet, Qin Mu had already sprinted several hundred yards forward. The huge knife suddenly pulled back and covered his fist like flowing water. Qin Mu gave a punch. Boom! The river surface trembled as water dragons glowing with a green light roared in anger and drowned out Pan Gong Tso, who was dozens of yards away. The river surface became incomparably bustling in a split second. 45 dragons flew out from the punch and merged with the river water as they rushed towards Pan Gong Tso, resulting in endless loud bangs. Qin Mu leaped into the sky while stretching his 10 fingers out. With his palms facing the sky, he pulled downwards and bolts of lightning lighted up the river surface. Those bolts of lightning gathered together as they struck in the center of the 45 dragons. As Qin Mu was coming down, the sword pellet in his hand changed into countless sword lights, sword treading mountains and rivers. The sword lights transformed into vast mountains and rivers that descended from the sky. They crashed into the water, breaking the surface and splitting the river in a radius of a dozen yards. The water that had risen was then separated into droplets that formed mountains in the river. Underneath, blood sprayed out as a figure escaped toward the bottom of the river. Qin Mu raised his hand, and his junior protector sword that was on his waist flew out with a hum. His index finger revolved, and junior protector sword spun frantically. Sword chi surrounded it as it used drill sword form, breaking apart the water to shoot straight to the bottom of the river, chasing the trail of blood. Qin Mu's shirt fluttered as he gently floated down from the sky and stepped on the river's surface, which was billowing with waves. The sound of waves crashing against themselves came from behind him, and it was something from when he was sprinting over. The waves were raised into midair and only landed down now, flying up and dispersing like fine jade. On the river's surface, Qin Mu changed his footsteps, and the river's surface around his feet instantly changed. The water whirled around him as if there were transparent flood dragons surrounding him, forming a huge circle. Shoo! Junior protector sword flew out from the river surface, continuing to spin the air. However, it was gradually slowing down. When it came in front of Qin Mu, it had already stopped spinning. The sword sheath on Qin Mu's waist flew out, transforming into a fish dragon, and swallowed the sword with its huge mouth before returning to his waist as a sword sheath. Qin Mu's expression remained calm as usual while he stood quietly. The sword pellet flew out from his hand and hovered in front of him, looking like a slightly larger water droplet. In his surroundings, streams of water were slowly rising into the sky as though the rain was falling in the other direction. The river water that rose into the sky turned into water vapor, forming clouds that covered a radius of dozens of yards. Flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder came from the clouds. As the lightning flashed from time to time, scales and claws could be faintly seen. "Pan Gong So, you have disappointed me." Qin Mu's calm voice traveled over the river's surface as he spoke indifferently. "Does the cultivation of your 19 lifetimes only amount to this? Why don't you dare to come out? I'm waiting to kill you so I can go back to continue my meal. After all, the dishes are going to turn cold soon." There was no movement on the river's surface. Qin Mu frowned and turned around to walk back to the shore. As he walked back through the same route he had taken earlier, astonished faces were all around him as the people turned their heads to look at him. Tourists followed him with their gazes as he walked away. Qin Mu ignored them and picked up the brush, ink, papers, and inkstone he had thrown out before noticing the iron hammer. He stretched his hand to grab the handle of the hammer and suddenly raised it to give a powerful slam on the ground. With a loud boom, the air in front of him was compressed to become a wall which soon crumbled to pieces. With this smash on the ground, the earth sunk and split open. Tremors came from underground as a figure moved away rapidly. Qin Mu leaped forward as if he was flying and came to the bamboo cane at the next instant. With a smack of his palm, the bamboo cane shot down into the ground and blood spurted out from the small hole it had made. Qin Mu leaped a few more times and came to the front of the two pig slaughtering knives. With his head below and legs above, his hands grabbed onto the handles of the knives. As he spun with them, countless knife lights sliced into the earth. His body moved forward, and he spun while the knife lights continued slashing into the earth like rain and waterfall. Suddenly, Qin Mu opened up his legs and slammed the ground with the backs of his knives. He flipped in the air before landing steadily on his feet. Sheathing his knives behind him, he turned around and walked into the capital city. Soon after that, he came to Jade Fragrance floor and walked into Green Bamboo Garden, coming to the private room after taking 2 turns around the statue of Bodhisattva of Compassion. The 2 great shamans were still in the private room and revealed astonishment when they saw him. "Are the dishes still warm?" Qin Mu asked. One of the great shamans looked at him in a daze while the other nodded immediately. "What about the wine?" "The wine has turned slightly cold." Qin Mu waved his hand and said, "Go warm it up and serve it to me. You, stay behind to pour it for me." After a moment, the great shaman that went to warm the wine came back. The other great shaman swirled the wine, and when it was clear, he poured a bowl and placed it respectfully in front of Qin Mu. "Is it poisoned?" Qin Mu asked with a pleasant expression. The 2 great shamans from Roland's Golden Palace immediately said, "We don't dare." Qin Mu laughed out loud. "I'm a divine physician who has learned from Jade Face Poison King. If you guys try to play poison in front of me, that would be quite a joke." The 2 great shamans laughed with him. Qin Mu's expression sunk and pointed at the great shaman who had warmed the wine. "Drink it." The expression of that great shaman changed drastically, and he started trembling. Qin Mu's face turned even darker, and he repeated coldly, "Drink it." The corners of the great shaman's eyes twitched as he picked up the wine bowl with trembling hands to drink 2 mouthfuls. He smiled. "No poison." As he said this, his body trembled and shriveled up like a deflated balloon. He became thinner and thinner until only his skin was left. Covering the skin was his clothes, and there seemed to be things wiggling in them. A bunch of insects chewed through his skin and flooded out, crawling in all directions. They then incinerated and turned into ashes. The face of the other great shaman turned ashen. Without a change in expression, Qin Mu rapped the table. "Serve me another bowl." The great shaman serving the wine had a tearful expression as he said, "There's poison in the wine." "Can't poison me," Qin Mu said indifferently. "Continue serving the wine." "Where are the dancers?" "Call them, songs and dances liven up the mood." The great shaman immediately poured a bowl of wine and summoned the dancers, continuing with the dance and music. Qin Mu ate the dishes and drank the wine as he enjoyed the songs and dances, clapping when he was entertained. This banquet lasted for quite a long time, and the sun was hanging late in the west when he waved his hand and made the singers and dancers fall back. The wine was highly toxic and contained a kind of shamanic poison. It had venomous insects that specialized in eating souls and corporeal bodies. However, Qin Mu was still fine after drinking nearly the entire jar of wine. Such a disappointment. Qin Mu rose, leaving the table in a mess. All the food and wine had been eaten and drunk by him, and it was more than even a dozen lords would have been able to eat. However, he didn't seem full as all the wine and food had been dissolved by spirit returning pill great supplement technique. You've lived through so many lifetimes, 11,000 years. What a pity that you never took your own path, always liking the path of others, jumping from one to another. After jumping here and there, you obliterated your own acute spirit. Qin Mu shook his head. I waited so long for you, yet you still don't dare to show up. What a joke. I thought you would be my opponent, but I didn't count that the older you get, the more cowardly you get. After I took the upper hand, you didn't dare to pick another fight with me again. The great shaman from Roland's Golden Palace was unable to make heads or tails of what he was saying, not knowing who he was talking to. What's the need for dreams when one doesn't dare to struggle? Qin Mu walked outside and chuckled. It's better for you to just go home. That's right, since it's your treat, foot the bill before leaving. He walked out of jade fragrance floor and left. In Green Bamboo Garden, the great shaman was befuddled and waved his hand to dismiss the singers and dancers. After a moment, Pan Gong So walked out from the shadows with a gloomy face while stained in blood. The sword skills of human emperor, he said in a low voice. Those were actually the sword skills of human emperor. Even though it could have been a deception, I don't think I saw it wrong. What that junior used were the sword skills of that human emperor, which were fused with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skills, as well as Rulai's Mahayana Sutra combined with Nine Dragons Monarch technique of Ling family. He had combined all these techniques. Qin Mu had fused so many techniques and divine arts together, and they were all top-notch techniques and divine arts, so Pan Gong So's Dao sword had been countered when they exchanged moves, messing up his mind and plans. Therefore, he no longer dared to fight head-on with Qin Mu. He didn't know how many moves of the human emperor's sword skills he had learned. The human emperor of the previous generation was an extremely strong practitioner, so he didn't dare to take the risk. In the previous generation, many incidents happened and there were many figures that were close to gods walking around in the world. He was one of them. Heaven Knife was also one of them. Other than them, there were numerous other glorious figures, but none of them were as dazzling. Human Emperor was the most dazzling star in the previous generation. Other than him, Pan Gong So had seen another human emperor, one of the generation prior to that man's. It was some 800 years back. The human emperors had appeared in his long life again and again, and every one of them was abnormally dazzling, overshadowing his radiance. Various human emperors could be traced even all the way back to his first lifetime and even before that. There were human emperors walking in the world since a very long time ago. He was once curious about this incomparably ancient inheritance. The techniques and divine arts of every human emperor were different, and every one of them was absolutely astonishing. There were even quite a number of saints that appeared once every 500 years that ended up as human emperors. He had wanted to get in touch with this inheritance, but since he died a few times under the hands of human emperors, he vanquished this thought. And right then, he saw the inheritance of the previous generation's human emperor in Qin Mu's skills. The previous generation's human emperor had vanished for a long time, and rumors said that he's been dead for 300 to 400 years. Pan Gong So had seen the sword of this human emperor before and knew that he was one of the strongest people in the previous generation. He was the strongest sword. After seeing it once, the sword light would be forever imprinted in one's heart, making them unable to forget it. If not for that, Pan Gong So would have never panicked and messed up, getting heavily injured by Qin Mu and losing the upper hand and escaping into the river. He had then went into the ground, but the youth's green heaven's eyes discovered him, and he used his bamboo cane, iron hammer, and pig-slaughtering knives to land fatal blows on him, adding injuries on top of injuries. Because of that, there was no way for him to turn back. His attainments in escaping arts had been cultivated to their extreme. The escaping skills of little Jade Capital were definitely the first-rate escaping arts in this world. His soul was extremely strong and close to the level of God, so Qin Mu wouldn't be able to kill him. In addition, the cultivation of his previous lifetime was still in his body. Even though this body was very weak and couldn't withstand such terrifying strength, it wasn't everything. If Qin Mu forced him to his limits, the explosion of his power would be enough to kill the youth. After he escaped, Qin Mu knew he couldn't make him stay and so didn't chase after him. Instead, he went back to Jade Fragrance floor and forced him to not dare to reveal himself, delaying him curing his injuries. If that ancient organization learned that the human emperor is not yet dead and still has a successor, things will definitely get bustling, Pan Gongso muttered in a low voice. The great shaman that had served Qin Mu wine immediately went forward and smiled. Prince, how are your injuries? Cult Master Qin had not paid just now. I don't need anyone to know I lost, even though I've lost many times. The great shaman was slightly stunned and suddenly felt his soul becoming stiff as if something had chained it up. He couldn't help revealing fear. The next moment, his flesh and bones melted and his soul disintegrated, leaving a pile of clothes on the ground. Pan Gongso walked out and footed the bill while thinking to himself, luckily I met that organization quite a few times and know how to contact them. I'm afraid that I won't be able to stay in the capital city anymore. This cult master Qin will definitely inform Chancellor Ba Shan when he goes back and not let me have a place to fit in. However, if I want to hide, Chancellor Ba Shan won't be able to find me. He walked out of Jade Fragrance floor and into the shadows, never appearing again. Qin Mu returned to Imperial College and found Chancellor Ba Shan. Pan Gongso is indeed the old monster of Roland's Golden Palace. I injured him, so I'm afraid he won't appear again. Chancellor Ba Shan was startled and cried out, he left? If he cast a spell on you in secret, how bad would that be? Teacher Heaven Knife didn't manage to kill him and had no choice but to hide his name. What about you then? The brat's cultivation is still in 6 Directions realm, but soon enough, he will break through into 7 Stars realm, then Life and Death realm. With only 10 or so years, I'm afraid he'll return back to Divine Bridge realm. At that time, you'll be dead meat. Qin Mu smiled. Why doesn't senior brother stay by my side? That way, he won't dare to make a move. Chancellor Ba Shan frowned and said, he knows my name and will be able to kill me 10 years later as well. It won't do, I can only solve the problem temporarily by staying at your side. I need to find and kill him to prevent further troubles. When he was done, he summoned the green bull to leave in a hurry. Qin Mu returned to Scholar's residence. While looking at his room, a sense of dread washed over him. If Chancellor Ba Shan doesn't find Pan Gongso, won't that brat stare at me every night? How will I be able to sleep like that? It simply won't do, I have to find that guy. This matter should be better if it was handled by the disciples of Heavenly Saint Cult. Unless he went back to Roland's Golden Palace to hide, he won't be able to escape my eyes and ears. Just as he thought this, a steward from Scholar's residence walked over and said, Academician Qin is already a Divine Arts practitioner, you should be moving to Divine Arts residence. There were other stewards helping Chen Wanyun and Cai Yunxiang to move as well while saying, you have also succeeded in breaking the wall so must also leave Scholar's residence to move to Divine Arts residence. Chen Wanyun and Cai Yunxiang saw Qin Mu and came over in a hurry to thank him. They said, if not for Cult Master's 6 Directions computational cannon, we wouldn't have been able to enter 6 Directions realm so fast. It was just a little thing, Qin Mu said humbly. Chen Wanyun had a weird expression, and Cai Yunxiang suffered a setback. To Qin Mu, it was a little thing, but to them, it was a huge help. Like this, did she still have hope to get rid of this cult master to become the female cult master of Heavenly Saint Cult? Scholar's residence, I'm leaving. Chen Wanyun waved to the scholars that had come to send him off and smiled. Whoever is willing to be the big brother can go fight for the role themselves. Yu Qinghong and Monk Yun Q had no interest in that as they looked at each other before smiling. You guys can go to Divine Arts residence first, we'll be there in 2 days. This position of the big brother should be handed to the other junior brothers and sisters. Qin Mu and the rest walked towards Divine Art's residence while the dragon Chalene followed behind them. This lazy dragon was determined to follow Qin Mu everywhere he went, never letting go of this meal master. That's right. Qin Mu recalled something and smiled. The Crown Prince will be leaving the capital city in a few days' time and he wants me to follow him to send disaster relief. If you guys are free, you can follow me to gain some experience. Wanyun, you have already become a divine arts practitioner and your abilities aren't weak anymore, so you'll be able to become the incense master of our sacred cult with another few more years of experience. Chen Wanyun felt his scalp crawling and became unwilling to follow him out. He said, every time we go out with Cult Master, danger always springs up all around and we are always escaping for our lives. I think I'd rather not go. I just cultivated to 6 directions realm so I still have to strengthen this realm. Cai Yunxiang's eyes glowed brightly. I'll go. Just as Qin Mu wanted to say something, another steward from Divine Art's residence came over and said, Scholar Chen Wanyun, the Crown Prince has appointed you to follow him out of the capital city. Other than you, there are a dozen more scholars from Divine Art's residence that will be coming as well. This video will end here.